Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam, hello, peace to you all, and welcome to another edition of Iran versus the Epstein Empire, or we could say the Axis of Resistance versus the Axis of Epstein. There's a lot of alternate titles for this program, and in fact, actually, this 12th edition has officially the title of Rock Around the Blockade. But Benji just came up with another one that's probably at least as good, which was Blockades and Blockheads. And I think we're going to be talking about some of the inanity and the idiocy of the blockheads. And as Mikey pointed out, it also kind of reminds us of Lego, which has become the Lego the resistance Lego has kind of become a sine qua non of the Iran versus the Epstein Empire series. As I mentioned, this is the 12th edition. It's great to be with you all after a week of many events and non-events that all bear some analysis to keep us updated about the state of the Ramadan War and its wider consequences and implications. And here to do that with me, we have, of course, our collaborators on this wonderful project. The Resistance is Fertile podcast hosts, one of whom is already here. Benji, it's great to see you, Benji.
Great to see you guys. Of course, Indi, of course, being in Sri Lanka, might be already under fuel shortages, which may mean that it's going to be a little bit, is running a little bit late. And also, I just realized my T-shirt may look like I endorse compulsive smoking, which I don't. The only compulsive consumption I recommend is Zionist tears. They are delicious. You get free refills every time you get on social media these days. If they're not delicious enough, please follow our good friend Mikey, Karaoke Computer, because he's been giving for free an absolute masterclass in how to fight defeatism and doomerism. And so there is no other place I would rather be tonight than at the feet of Brother Mikey and Brother Adnan. And as you can see, I'm actually growing some facial hair, and I was just reinforcing that, being caught at this very Shia moment of my life by Brother Adnan, who's told me that his own facial hair has got him into places that he knows for a fact he wouldn't have gotten to without it. So yeah, we have the hidden Imam, and now we have the hidden titles of the episodes, and yes, it's Blockades and Blockheads and Lego for the win. As an autistic person, this is the war for me. It's all about Legos. It's all about narcissists, which is narcissists. You have to realize they are like the absolute enemies of autistic people. Like autistic people can't help but say what they think and think what they say, and narcissistic people would sooner die. They never mean what they say or say what they mean. So we're like polar opposites. And this is the final showdown, the final battle between the narcissistic, idealistic, Western philosophical empire and the dialectical materialist, of which my autistic brothers and sisters are the vanguard. So I'm here for it.
Nice. Absolutely. Well, it was a great shout out to a number of things there, Benji, but it also reminds me that, we want to welcome back again, returning panelist and ex-publisher extraordinaire, I would say, as you were pointing out, Benji, in these recent weeks. Been very helpful and useful. Mikey, comrade, brother, it's so great to have you back on.
Hey, thanks, comrade. Glad to be back. It's so funny, Benji, that you mentioned like being autistic and loving Legos, because I'm starting to reevaluate some of like where I'm placed on the spectrum, because I used to be like hyper fixated on Legos. Like it was my thing for a very long time. Like, you know, you'd make things with the instructions and then deconstruct them and then kind of like do your own thing. And yeah, and like my mom was actually worried about like how I played, because it was like so like intense and structured. Like I could be like sweating in my room and my fingers be bleeding because, you know, the sharp corners of the Legos. Anyway, I think yeah, it's been quite an interesting time contending with doomerists, and particularly like Western Marxists or just Western anti-imperialist frameworks online.
Don't
Yeah,
forget the air quotes, brother.
heavy scare quotes on all of that, right?
That's
Just I think in part because they don't really have a background. They haven't really kind of like exercised their kind of like analytical muscles, right? Like they're not using any type of actual dialectical materialist analysis when it comes to developments in Iran. I think partly because there is this compulsion that I think we all have to kind of be mindful of, even for ourselves, which is to just kind of react to events as if these events are happening in some kind of bottled up vacuum outside of time, history, and the global economy. And I think one particular example, I don't want to go into who was most responsible in propagating it, but just this notion that the blockade that Trump initiated in response to Iran's selective blockade, rather than being just another completely rash and impulsive flying from the seat of his pants decision based on the walls closing in on daddy, it is somehow the next strategic step in a sinister master plan in which the deep state is guiding Trump's decisions along this path of total oil and resource dependency in the United States, rerouting traffic from all of the Persian Gulf, all of West Asia, and all of its buyers to United States ports. And if one were to do any actual research into global logistics, finance capital, and just kind of treaty agreements, and the limitations in the entire industrial supply chain, particularly when it comes to the United States, they would see that this is absurd on its face. Like the one particular post that started to go viral, where it was like clearly like a MAGA poster from a Fox News video propaganda clip that a lot of people on the left were sharing, being like, look at all these empty tankers going to you know, US ports now that, you know, Donald Trump has you know created a blockade around the blockade, right? And then here's the plan. Like it's basically like QAnon 2.0, right? Where it's like this is all part of some grand plan that you know started with Russia, Ukraine, and the you know, the kind of resource wars that revolved around that, the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline into the basically invasion of Venezuela, kidnapping of Maduro, and the semi-privatization agreements still, you know, under negotiation around Venezuela's oil, and progressing into the attempted annexation of Greenland, which has a lot of rare earths and has a particularly important geostrategic placement. And that this is just, along with the genocide in Gaza, somehow part of this U.S. think tank and Defense Department plan that is going exactly as they wanted to. And if you look at all of this as a totality, any reasonable person can see that this is an absolute clusterfuck. And it may be happening in the order that, you know, Pentagon officials would want, but it is definitely not happening at the times and being executed with the necessary preparation and strategy required to actually make it work, right? And And so Trump, I think, is basically trying to speed run through what would essentially, like, if it were to be executed properly, I don't think it would be successful. But even then, like, if it were to have any chance of being executed properly, it would have to happen over kind of like a generational time scale, right? Not over the course of 3 fucking years. And we can see in this desperation that the U.S., despite all of its outward appearances, is actually in a state of strategic retreat. And it's just not willing to admit it yet. So it's kind of casting out violently in all directions. And I think a lot of quote unquote Western Marxists need to actually look at the facts, look at the material realities, the entire global economic system, how it operates in it, and all of its various mechanisms, instruments, and its structural logistical limitations in order to actually understand what's going on, rather than just casting out wild conspiracy theories so that when something happens that even remotely in line with all of your insane prognostications, you can say, I was first and I tried to warn everybody. Because I think that is essentially what's motivating a lot of people, rather than a genuine concern for the people who are most affected in the region.
Yeah, if I may say something about this last point of yours, Mikey, we are to the economic summit later, but there is this, I call it the hot take economy. And this is really, there's a hot take political economy, and this is the currency of social media, right? And just as the rest of the political economy of imperialism, it's based on bubbles, it's based on bluster, it's based on, the inside track, like the way people sold Apple products because it made you be, one of the super people and all the rest of it. So if you want followers, if you want to have an impact, you always need to have the hot take, right? And just go trust the plan, do the meme. Iran knows exactly what it's doing. Iran, and the last thing it knows not to do is to listen to randos on the internet, right? So instead of going, okay, we're here to legitimize, we have a small place, but a very important one in the struggle, people embark in the hot take economy. And everything is commodified, and the last thing you want to do, because it's all about bluster, it's all about narcissism, it's all about projecting, inflating your ego, is to look stupid, especially naively believing, and I'm going to say it, brown people. If you naively believe that brown people will win, and it looks as though they are facing a defeat, because revolution is about going from defeat to defeat until final victory. Anyway, it's going to be defeats all the way down to the victory. I think that's it. I think there's racism in it. It's, they don't mind believing CIA propaganda. Like I've had Trotskyites and I've had Maoists and I've had anarchists quoting back CIA fact sheets about China to me. And I said, look, it says on their website, it's all NED and what have you. And they go, well, the CIA doesn't always lie. So they don't mind at all, lying and pushing the lies of the white people. But push the lies, it's not the lies. Sometimes it's psychological operations, and we understand it, pushing the psychological operation of brown people that later are revealed to be not factual. Oh no, you couldn't have this. Like this is instant death in the hot take economy. So I'm telling our viewers, realize what it is about. Again, trust your heart. Content that nourishes the spirit of resistance inside you. It's not going to be easy. We're not going to tell lies. We're not going to claim easy victories, but this can be done. It's content for you. Content that makes you think, oh my God, there's a cunning plan, there is 5D chess, they have a strategy like Richard Medhurst, I love you because you said fuck Israel until the end of time. I'm trying not to swear anymore. But apart from that, you are actually guilty of pushing this kind of stuff. Yeah, they're trying to do this thing with the oil, that thing with the oil. They're trying to do all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, someone said it's a blockade and it's also a kind of block. WAD, they shut their WAD, and there's nothing more they can do than what the political economy of this particular phase of imperialism forces them to do. And it's defeat all the way. It's literally, we said suicide by AOR at the beginning of it, and I'm glad we did, because this is literally, they're living the meme. Trump is going, oh, you want to blockade? No, I'm going to blockade me. And if you blockade me, I'm going to shoot you.
I'm not fired. I quit.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And people go, oh, this must be such a strategic, I think a strategic genius, which is total nonsense. Diesel is not made in the US. Every single thing that travels the earth is from diesel. Steel is not made. I mean, Mikey, you put the numbers on the table. Steel is not made in the US. Nothing is made in that godforsaken place except for bubbles, really complex financial bubbles. And they can't even make proper memes anymore, right? Like they are being beaten to it by those incredible and totally impenetrable underground meme cities that Iran seems to have an absolute infinity of. Like now there are like 5, 6, 7 studios producing these Lego videos. Me, I'm autistic, I'm rigid, explosive media are my guys. Like the others aren't, but don't hold a candle to them, but still they're roasting empire because that's how easy it is. So please, please, please don't ever amplify anything that makes you feel as though this battle is lost. This battle is not lost. It will be won. I don't know when, nobody knows when. Men plan, but if Indi was here, he would read the Quran to us. Men plan, but Allah is the best planner. Behooves us to trust the plan and to stand as upright as we can. We're not under bombs. We're not in Gaza. We're not in South Lebanon. We're not in Yemen. The least we can do is kind of hold ourselves on Twitter. And if you're feeling a little bit wobbly, get a nice warm cuppa. Dynasties, they're delicious.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sympathetic. I understand that we are such targets of disinformation and misinformation, and we have, every reason, given the state of the world, from a kind of global perspective, that there's so much death and suffering, being spread around by the evil, imperial colonial violence and these projects. I understand that it's it can be understandable to have doubts, questions, and so on. I think one of the big problems, however, is that just as you were both saying, there is a dynamic on social media that encourages kind of quick hot take, and the economics of that, and catastrophizing and over dramatizing things actually works better in the mechanism of gaining, attention and followers, and being celebrated for like having something interesting and new to say and so on. But those are not based on real things, right? So if we can kind of exercise a bit more discipline over how and when we post, I mean, I think it's fair to raise kind of like contra analysis in a wider perspective, try understand, work through the topic and the issues, but then be open to correction. This is the other point, is like, if you aren't open to correction, that somebody might come with material analysis that falsifies some components or some of the assumptions that are causing the greater anxiety, fear, and concern about this catastrophic possibility. There's no benefit to having been the first one to, say something that might be true, especially if it's negative and it harms the resistance. Is like, well, so why do you want to be out ahead of the actual analysis? And if you are
correct, it's false.
Yeah, and if you're corrected, admit an error, be thankful that you have comrades to improve. That's really what these forums and discussions should be. And I think that's actually why we have this kind of a panel show, to bring together community. It doesn't mean that if you didn't think those things, if you didn't find maybe you found some of these kinds of concerns compelling and worrying, etc., that's fine. Nobody needs to say, oh, if you didn't already know that, of course you shouldn't be thinking any of these things. I mean, that's not the point of, I think, Mikey's, original thought here. come to these kinds of fora and let's discuss it and figure it out. And you get reinforcement in what's going to be useful and productive for you going forward. How can you analyze what's happening? So, somebody did put in, in the chat, I think, about some of these kind of representatives of positions on what's happening, that they've heard. I don't know if these were the ones you were thinking of, Mikey, but one person did put out, that they would appreciate a second opinion on Medhurst's petrodollar piracy theory he recently shared, for example. So that's one. I don't know if either of you have thoughts, if we want to start talking actually about some of the economics of the situation. These are genuine discussions that are happening, that people are concerned about what are the consequences of what's happening. So
if I may interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to invite Mikey to do a little roundup. We haven't met for a week. Of the initial title of this episode was actually One Night in Islamabad. And Mikey, you've been really at the top of your game, tweeting about what happened there. So if you could just give us a little bit of roundup in your analysis, I think might be helpful. What do you think, Adnan?
Sure. Well, I would actually like to just because we've been on the topic, go to the petrodollar conspiracy, basically, right? And then I would like to talk about the first of what I think will probably be several Islamabad talks. So yeah, I do sympathize with people who are concerned about a conspiracy by the United States that's being played out to maintain its loosening grip, its unipolar hegemony over the planet, right, and the global economy. I understand why people are concerned that this might be a step in that progression rather than a strategic retreat. So first of all, when you look at that video that was proliferated around X and I'm sure other platforms, what some people who actually have experience like looking at shipping trackers pointed out was that it was a highly selective selection of tanker transport. And if you look at the actual shipping activity that was going on the world scale, and then basically select all of the things that whoever posted that video unselected in order to show like, oh, this is just a single flow of traffic, it really shows that in that point in time, global maritime traffic was just following very similar routes with some exceptions because of the closure of the strait, right? And another person pointed out that and this seems kind of a no-brainer, but tankers always take one entire trip empty. There's nothing remarkable about that, right? You take one trip empty, and then you load up and then you deliver it, right, to its final destination. And so on top of that, there's another very kind of plainly obvious on its face issue when it comes to thinking that Trump can politically coerce every single Asian country, including China, to basically take a trip that is more than twice as long, rather than getting their crude from the Persian Gulf, a medium light sweet crude that Iran produces in particular. They would get a very light sweet crude from shale oil fields in the United States, and they would do so in a way that costs more because it's not like these ships run on solar power, right? And these super tankers, they move literally at the speed of a bicycle, which is why it takes more than a month after the strait's closure for the last ships carrying oil to arrive on U.S. shores, which is tomorrow, by the way. The last VLCC full of oil from the Persian Gulf arrives probably around April 15th. And that's why I've been saying that's around after when all hell will break loose in the global economy. because the delayed economic fuse that Iran has set on their economic time bombs are going to start blowing up in the United States. And so even beyond the pure economic unfeasibility, the pure geographic, logistical nightmare it would be, the only way you could scale up to the same level of imports for oil is to double your tanker fleet, right? And it's not like building super tankers are cheap, right? But also it would take twice as long. So you would have to have a constant staggered flow, and hope that the strait is never closed again, basically, because you'll be double fucked. Anyway, so the logistical reason domestically why this will not be possible for the United States to completely dominate the entire global market of oil trade, including in Asia, comes down to just resource limitations and refining capabilities. So a lot of the refineries that are built in the US, one, they're very old, and they were built during a time where most of the oil that the US was processing was heavy sour, right? And so their refining plants, which are incredibly expensive and take up to a decade to build, which require a lot of complex engineering to create cokers and crackers, right? They don't process the light sweet that comes from shale oil well. You actually have to mix it with something heavier in order for it to even be properly refined. So that is why we are a net exporter, because of the shale oil boom in kind of the early aughts. And so there was a huge transition, right, to the type of oil that the US was drilling. And a lot of our, our heavy sour is tapped. But what's been coming to light recently is that whatever remains of the shale oil deposits that we have explored, we've basically fracked them. We're fracking them at max capacity, and many of the top producing shale oil fields are peaked. They have peaked in the level of the amount that we can extract from them, and it's only going to decline. So if the global demand for US oil suddenly skyrocketed, where there was a new market of billions of new people in Asia who needed US oil, we couldn't do that. But two, even if we could, that would basically mean that we would be exporting all of our oil and the United States would have none of it, right? Or we would have to import the equivalent, which makes no sense. The other argument in this case is, well, the kind of strong arming over Venezuela's oil resources will be the solution for that. And I got to tell you again, like, look into the actual numbers, right? It's quite ironic. It's sort of this kind of karmic justice that it's terrible for Venezuelans, but it creates this inbuilt limitation for the United States best plans, is due to the debilitating sanctions over a decade and a half of maximum pressure sanctions against Venezuela. They have been unable to update their oil extraction and infrastructure, systems. So because of that, they struggle to extract more than 800,000 to 1 million gallons of heavy crude. And heavy crude, of course, Venezuela has the largest, oil in the ground or in the ocean in the world. But the catch is that Venezuela has the heaviest, sourest crude oil. It's so hard to extract that you actually have to add like a bunch of chemicals to basically loosen it up in order for it to flow through the pipes, or it'll get stuck. And so the limitation is 1 million barrels per day extracted, or gallons, and it takes like about a decade to really, and a lot of foreign direct investment to be able to repair that infrastructure. So it would take a long time to actually be able to use the oil. But as you can kind of sense a trend here, it's a very different type of oil. So there's not a whole lot they can do in the near term or even in the long term to try to exploit those resources to corner the entire global market. So that's just one of a series of limitations that will keep the U.S. from becoming kind of the unipolar petro hegemon. It's quite silly when you look at the actual numbers. And so going to the Islamabad talks, it seems probably like a very unrelated issue, but I think the kind of doomer prognostications come from the same place. And so I think that is worth talking about, especially because there may or may not be talks coming up very soon, right? There were a lot of very influential people online, I think, who were really kind of exploiting the understandable frustration and anxiety of Iranians who have been in the streets on the ground, who were very justifiably worried that going into talks would be like another kind of like catastrophic, Charlie Brown trying to kick the football and Lucy promising not to pull it away, right? That I mean, the last time that they were in the middle of talks, the U.S. assassinated their supreme leader, right, Ayatollah Khamenei. So I think what makes it markedly different, and again, this requires us to look at the actual facts on the ground, how the entire conditions of the whole political order changed the moment that the Ramadan War began, starting in particular with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, right? And so the bargaining position of Iran completely flipped in those 40 days. So, and we also have to, it's so easy to forget, even though it basically just happened. Like, the reason that Trump offered and accepted the ceasefire talks on terms that use the 10-point plan Iran submitted as the framework, as the basis upon which to begin negotiating, that includes the permanent removal of U.S. forces in the region, right? And a complete cessation of hostilities against Iran and all of its allies in the axis of resistance, and a lifting of sanctions and sovereignty over the control of the Strait of Hormuz and everything that passes through it. The fact that he would even, it's not just a bluff. It is partly a bluff because everything that Trump does is a bluff, but it was based on walking back a potentially apocalyptic bluff. Trump had put out fake ultimatum after fake ultimatum, and like, the most lenient of university professors just kept extending the deadline over and over and over again, out of such grace and mercy that he holds in his heart for the Iranian people, right? No, it was all about closing the gap between the ultimatum deadlines and increasing the stakes and the penalties, the supposed threats, the supposed penalties for these veiled threats, not veiled threats, explicit threats, to escalate up the nuclear escalation ladder, right? So he was in a bind because he knew that if he actually had to follow through on this threat, he would have to engage in a nuclear strike of Iranian civilian vital infrastructure. And even he is smart enough to know that Iran would do exactly what they said they would do in response, which is to basically wipe out the feasibility of life in these colonial dependencies that are aiding U.S. empire, right? You take out a few desalination plants in Qatar and the UAE that rely on desalination for 90% of their water, for 90% of their domestic population are foreign nationals, right? That would be the end of Qatar and the UAE entirely. Same with Israel and Saudi Arabia. Their civilian electrical and water infrastructure and military infrastructure is all much more centralized than Iran. They are, and Israel in particular is a significantly smaller landmass. So it'd be very, very easy with the thousands of ballistic missiles that Iran still has stockpiled, with the tens of thousands of Shahed drones that they probably still have stockpiled, to destroy every aspect of settler life in Israel and all of the Gulf countries, right? So in the final hours, it was said by sources, reliable sources in Iranian press outlets that Trump was scrambling to evade his own deadline. And so that's how they got to the negotiating table. And so why wouldn't the Iranian delegation and the Iranian leadership in the Supreme National Security Council take that deal, right? And so, you know, there were people like, this is someone I have no hesitation naming, Zay Squirrel, right? It has gone on multiple, you know, very kind of like arrogant and overconfident and over prescriptive and chauvinistic rants about how Iran is doing everything wrong, Iranian leadership, right? And that how anyone who would basically insinuating that anyone who would accept ceasefire talks at this point under these conditions is a reformist traitor. But if you actually look at the Supreme National Security Council's composition, and kind of like the inbuilt requirements in the Islamic Republic's constitution, you will see that there is a super majority of what are called principalists, or what more Americans know as hardliners, who have been the toughest negotiators, or people who are completely normally against any type of future negotiations with U.S. empire, right? People like Saeed Jalili, people like Ghalibaf, right, who is the head of the delegation, right? And what I've also been arguing is that everyone who used to be a reformist, at least as far as national defense is concerned, is now a principalist. They are all principalists now. Anyone with any influence, anyway, right? And anyone who tries to hold by the kind of old way of doing things to try to negotiate, in a position of a disadvantage, has been basically already swept into the dustbin of history, right? And so, this principalist majority National Security Council, they are the ones who put together the 10-point plan and who put out the statement justifying the 10-point plan and why they were entering into negotiations. And they were the negotiators, which is why it was no surprise, to me anyway, and to most people who have been paying attention, that they turned down all of the onerous items on the ridiculous 15-point plan offered up by the United States at the talks, right? Of course they would walk away from that. They're not going to sell out their people. And here's another thing that I think is probably one of the most important things to keep in mind as the delegation moves forward in peace talks, is either every single one or almost every single one of the leadership in Iran negotiating on their people's behalf are veterans of at least one war, right? Almost all of them, if not all of them, are veterans of the 8-year war that Iraq waged against Iran, and other kind of like struggles against the CIA and Israeli funded proliferation of ISIS in the region, and in the training and funding and fighting with members of the Axis of Resistance in other countries. So knowing that, they have been in hot conflict, extended, grueling, brutal hot conflict, right? Where they have seen their brothers die in grisly ways in front of their eyes, right? Where they have been forced to see the actual humanity of their enemies face to face, being destroyed in gruesome ways, right? They have seen the toll it has on the general population, who they very much genuinely care about, right? Even if the vast majority of that general population is demanding, to not negotiate, right? But what these people who are negotiating, the leadership that's negotiating, understands is that if you have an offer on the table, even if it's from a bad faith partner, and you are in a solid position to negotiate, you negotiate, because you don't want to continue a genocidal war where even if you'll win, millions of your beloved people will die, right? And it will incur another, hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion in damages, like it did in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So I think that is something to consider, especially with respect to what's going on in the field in southern Lebanon. before you pop off with all of your frustrations about what is and isn't happening, consider the fact that you have a phone and not a gun in your hands, right? And that requires some fucking humility. If you are not in the field, risking everything, and potentially, understanding that if you are in a leadership position, the decisions you make will have direct and massive, irreversible impacts on the people you represent, you have to have some humility that they maybe know better than you about what is best for their people and what the facts on the ground are. They have more access to important information than you. They have a better understanding of the field of play. And so if you're going to do anything, like if you have concerns and criticisms, I would recommend keeping them to yourself or to share them privately with friends.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are in charge know what they're doing. They're the ones fighting. They're the ones bleeding. They're the ones sacrificing and losing. And so the best thing that we can do, regardless of our concerns, is to express unequivocal and unrelenting support for their efforts.
I wanted to say something about, I'm kind of the hope of trying to understand the 5D chess of China's new internationalism and what are they about. And my general view is, I guess because I'm a psychotherapist, is China is holding space for a possible future once we've all come out of this abusive, narcissistic relationship, right? When you're a therapist, this is what you do. You don't get in the fight, because if you do, you actually end up with the victim banding with the narcissist. And you don't tell people what to do, but you just, the way you comport yourself, the way you speak, the way you validate, the way you listen, the way you ask, what you offer is all about holding space for a different way of being, for different types of relationships. And really, China is doing that. So that means that it does things that hurts my, ex-post Trotskyite little heart. They do business with unsavory characters. They even do business with the Zionist entity. And this is very unpleasant. But at the same time, if you realize that what they do is, it's possible to live in a world in which we just exchange on the basis of what we can offer one another, and we don't constantly judge one another and all the rest of it. But we don't just, talk, we provide things, and also we can defend ourselves. Then you are holding space. And I was thinking about what Iran did with those negotiations in the same kind of way, because Sun Tzu, I think, is, to me, well superior to Clausewitz, because Clausewitz is about prosecuting war, winning the war, and also is a racist, and I just hate racists. But Sun Tzu says the real victory is the peace that comes after the war. Not just that you realize all your war aims and you continue your politics by other means, but the kind of world that folks live in after the hot conflict is over. And on that front, I think the Iranians are also thinking in this particular kind of way. So, if your enemy, be it the most depraved demon that, hell just wretched out because they're too toxic even to be kept in hell, offers to talk, you always say, okay, let's talk. These are our conditions. We can talk on these conditions. 2 weeks, okay, we'll give you 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks aren't lost on Iran because they're self-sufficient in everything. So they will just rearm, and you have to realize that the US is not self-sufficient, so it cannot rearm. It can only blow its ego up. But you've seen something, and there is a shift, in the West since the Iraq War. We live in a world in which we have been taught, like almost learned helplessness, that public opinion doesn't count. You can put 3, 4, 5 million people in the street saying, we don't want this. They think war, and they go, man, we'll just do it. And it's the same in many countries, right? But at the same time, if you're thinking about creating a new revolutionary consciousness, and Marx said, ideas become material when they seize the imagination of the masses, there is a massive shift in the masses. I just saw today the net negative favorability rating of the Zionist entity in US males below 45 is minus 45 or something like this. Like, it's never been seen before, like you've never seen before. And they did this great thing, like Pakistan is, in terms of its government, kind of a satrapy of the empire, trying to kind of, get a bit of wiggle room, but mostly will do what the empire says at the end of the day. But with this thing, it's turned everything. Like, you had the defense minister of Pakistan tweeting something. I know Erdogan always tweets as a tweet game and then sells oil to the Zionist entity. But at the same time, this guy said it is the defense minister, and I think he called the Zionist demons or something like this, and he said they had to go back to Hilo or some such thing before the talks. And at the talks, like, the Iranians got the red carpet. They were feted by everybody like you've never seen before. And to fly back home, they were escorted by, I don't know how many, probably Chinese jets from Pakistan. This, in terms of world public opinion, such as it is, and it's still not powerful, but you get to a point, again, like, we've been seeing those dialectical inversions about pretty much everything these days, and you're going to get to a point where it's going to go into dialectical inversion. Guys, there was another warehouse that accidentally caught fire in Southern California today, right? These things are going to increase and increase, and it will probably start by not this mass movement led by these left groups, which at the end of the day are just there to do performative demonstrations, but literally people going, there is no organization, there is no left here. I'm just going to take my box of matches and do whatever, go and smoke a big blunt, and maybe something will fall on the floor. Something is moving at that level, and Iran is playing that particular game. If you see their game on social media, it's very clear. It's all about principles. It's all about honor. It's all about dignity. It's all about the rootedness of social nature, to speak in Ali Kadri's terms, right? It's all about, we belong here. We've been here forever. We will always do fair stuff, but we won't stand. You had Arakshi, he said, no, we'll never agree to enrichment because it is all right, it is legal, and we are humans just like all of you. And when you stand on that basis of human dignity of, no, I'm a free person of the world and nobody's going to tell me what I can or cannot do if they themselves can do it, your position is unassailable, especially because they have prepared materially for this thing for so long. And they're doing something to world public opinion that they wouldn't do if they took a maximalist position. And I love it that they're not called conservative anymore. They're not called maximalist anymore. They're not called extremists anymore. They are called principlist. And there's a very good reason why they call themselves principlists, is because those people, believe it or not, actually govern not just their country, but their existential war against the most genocidal, depraved, disgusting, cruel, gleeful, exterminating force that hell has ever carried. And they do it in a principled manner. And this does something that no amount of, we don't, you fooled us twice, so you can, stick your ceasefire up your Hormuz. That wouldn't happen if they didn't go every time. And it's also the Islamic principle, I think, if the other side stops shooting, you stop shooting. But you still stand on your own, hey, I'm still at least as human as you, and you're going to treat me as such.
Well, we've moved on so far from where I had some points originally to connect with about the negotiations and all of that, I don't know how worthwhile it is to rehearse and track.
Get into it. Get
that.
into it.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess just that there were some interesting points that you made, Mikey, about the responsibility, the reason why they would accept negotiations. And I think one thing that has been proven is that Iran, in good faith, does not want war. Like, that is a moral kind of principle to have established that is crucial and important, it seems to me. I mean, we're, supposed to advocate anti-war positions and so on. I think what they have affirmed is that, all of us online watching, kind of cheering Iran, yes, they're winning, etc., all this kind of like voyeuristic. I mean, we try and do good things with that position, of trying to kind of counter disinformation, get the message of resistance, out there. But I think Iran's point is like, we don't want war. Nobody should want war. It's destructive. It's costly. It causes suffering. It's and I think this is an important message that has been since the beginning, when we had people like, Professor Marandi saying exactly what was going to happen, but expressing it as, a problem, because what else is Iran to do to defend its sovereignty against unjust war, aggression, pressure, racism, bigotry? This is what they're facing, and that this is what would happen as the necessary response. And as a result, Iran has been very successful in the fact, and something we said when we were speaking with Nina Farnia a little over a week ago, which is that nobody blames Iran right now. Nobody says, oh, my gas is high. It's all Iran's fault. They say, what a stupid war. Why did we get into it? Why did the US do this? Why is Trump, incapable of, actually thinking rationally, of negotiating, of trying to solve problems? So, I mean, I think what had happened, and in discussing with Laith Marouf yesterday, we were talking a little bit about, I don't want to rehearse the whole argument, but a point that I made in response to some good suggestions he was making about the character of these negotiations, is that other regional powers, Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt, had been involved in some kind of campaign in the week or 2 weeks before, kind of back room, publicly, etc., and talking about how, oh, this is terrible, we have to put an end to this war, can't we have negotiations, etc. I mean, Iran is also modeling and showing that its goal is not being a dominating hegemon in the region. Its goal is decolonizing the region, ending the imperialist system, so that there can be fruitful, successful, positive relations between sovereign nations in the region for the development of their people, and that they are prepared to do whatever it takes to achieve a future where they are going to work. Maybe they're not going to work so much with these corrupt Gulf regimes. We don't know their fate. They may, wed themselves so closely to U.S. empire. They, may not break with Zionism and imperialism to the extent that, ultimately larger scale economic, military, and political forces may see the transformation of those, fake post-colonial Gulf principalities. But the population centers are Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, and they are part of the future of the region. And so I think, to avoid showing that they will not be collaborative, but that they actually are part of a future solution for the benefit of the entire region, I think it was important to sort of derail this kind of idea that, these other parts of the Middle East and Islamic world are really concerned about a solution, but Iran just simply won't listen. So when they accepted the framework, and there was, the opportunity to begin discussions on the basis of claims and demands that Iran has articulated from the very beginning and established in military and political terms to be already facts in a way on the ground, it would have been in a way, it wouldn't have looked good for their future kind of diplomatic kind of attempt to pull people together in this region and show an alternative. An alternate way is possible. And I think that's what they've been modeling. So I think that's an important component of the reason why they might, that goes beyond just this kind of zero-sum kind of competition of war, that, oh, if you're in the war and they've already cheated you a couple of times, why would you do it? It's like they're thinking in a horizon that is much more regional, human, future-centered, about the welfare of this entire region. And that's why I appreciate so much their willingness to do that. And I don't think they went in with many illusions about it, and so they were prepared to kind of switch back to what may be necessary in the coming days to continue. And of course, they never stopped their control over the strait. So in some, there's no way in which they really lost anything by doing this. They only gained, I would say, politically, in terms of respect. Somebody in the chat had also put a position like, I never expected that Pakistan would have this like status as a diplomatic, kind of, role. And this was big for Pakistan. And that's, again, something that Laith mentioned that really resonated with exactly that vision that I'm mentioning, which is that, Pakistan is, at least its elite, its military has been part of the imperialist alliance for decades and decades, a part of the US Cold War strategy and the Afghanistan war, and ever since, right? And so, you don't necessarily expect a lot of anti-imperialist. And look what happened when you have somebody with minor anti-imperialist tendencies. In the case of Imran Khan, they have a soft coup, a constitutional coup to remove him from power. And we know, if people have followed that story, that that was a kind of constitutional coup hatched in the Department of State, and we know that they had these messages and meetings and so on about how they should best accomplish this. So one would not expect a great deal from Pakistan's current government and the military establishment. But what happened? It created an opportunity where there was such an outpouring of love and appreciation for the Iranian delegation. It really kind of put Pakistan in a position of raising its status to be hosting this, but also perhaps trying to model yet again, come to the right side, brothers. Your people want it. We want it. We will be friendly neighbors. Don't get trapped into the game of the empire. Now, of course, they may not listen. There are material conditions and interests that are there, but it was kind of a brilliant move in some ways to choose Islamabad for that. And if there are continuing, talks there, as Mikey said, it'll be so interesting to see how the public kind of perhaps puts a certain kind of political pressure, in just the same way we've seen a galvanized, revolutionarily inspired people in Iran have put you could say they've put political pressure even on their negotiating team. If there was any fear, which is totally ridiculous, as Mikey was pointing out, if there was any fear that this was some kind of reformist kind of gambit and that they might be seduced into selling out, the people every single night in their millions have made that an impossibility. It is impossible, not because, somebody might be manipulated or have a wrong idea, etc., because there's so much galvanized political pressure right now for achieving their revolutionary kind of goals that I think the people are the best defense. And we should have, anybody watching this should have watched that, okay, yes, people on the ground were saying no negotiations. They didn't say, we want to get rid of this government because they've gone there and are actually engaging in negotiations, but by saying will not accept anything except principles that are established principles of justice. They have essentially bolstered their negotiating team to be able to stand up to the United States such that they had no problem saying, if the United States wants to end this right now, that's fine. We go back. We have given away nothing. We have only enhanced our position in the eyes of the world. So I think, I was very impressed with what happened in just one night in Islamabad, in some ways. And, let's kind of encourage one another not to think, as I think was Mikey's main point from the beginning, that and Benji as well, that because it relies on a kind of racial kind of perspective of white supremacy and brown, black, and global South people's submissive kind of inferiority, that they can't that they're masters of the universe and they have every step mapped out, and it's all part of their plan. I mean, I think that's kind of foolish. So,
Yeah. Just a few more things about the talks and kind of the other, I think, significant developments that revolved around them and immediately succeeded them, because I think it'll inform the things that could happen next. I think I like what you're saying there, Adnan, about how the people on the ground, right, the grassroots, are just such a great bulwark that helps to continue pushing the leadership forward. And if there was any doubt, which I agree with you, I don't think there is, that they would, concede something that is unacceptable to the people, that the people would make sure that didn't happen. But I think they also created boundaries for themselves to fortify themselves against, who they deeply understand, even prior to the decapitation strikes and the attacks that started the war, that they're dealing with people who they can never trust, right? I think one of the most telling moments, which I think was really powerful PR, but also not just PR, was the photo showing that they had brought some of the pictures of the children who were killed in the Minab Elementary School strike, and some of their backpacks in the front seat, right? Like to remind themselves on whose behalf they're negotiating, right? And whose memory they have to honor. And I think that's really powerful, like a really powerful reminder. They're not going to forget. They're going to take that memory with them to the table, right? They're not going to give anything up that would dishonor their memories. And I also think shortly after, in an interview with the foreign minister Abbas Araghchi, he was asked, like, why don't you give up peaceful nuclear enrichment, right? And because that's all they've been advocating for, right? Like, they've never said explicitly in any negotiations, we want a nuclear missile, we want nuclear weapons capability, we want, to enrich to fissile material to put on a nuclear warhead. They have never said that, although they have every right to. And so they have always insisted upon the right to enrich uranium for the purposes of nuclear power. And when Araghchi was pushed on this by an interviewer, he said, like, basically that they have every right to have sovereign control over the decisions that they make for their people, particularly when it comes to resource management, right? And that it is literally kind of like against their guiding principles to submit to those types of demands. And that isn't just rhetoric, that is actually literally enshrined in the Islamic Republic's constitution. It's Article 2, Section C of, there's a kind of list of general principles before it gets into the actual constitutional stuff, kind of like a guiding framework. So I was just going to read some of it to you. In which equity, justice, political, economic, social, and cultural independence and national solidarity are secured by recourse to negation of all forms of oppression, both the infliction of and the submission to it, and of dominance, both its imposition and its acceptance. That is in the Islamic Republic Constitution, that we will not be dominated, we will not be controlled, We will not let someone else make decisions about our future for us. And we will not let anyone else do that to anyone else. That is also what happens to guide the principles that have led to the construction of the axis of resistance. And so that's I think another thing. This may be a good segue into Lebanon, is people throughout this entire conflict, for decades, have always accused Iran of throwing their partners, who are called pejoratively in the West proxies, but are partners, allies in resistance in reality. They're constantly accusing Iran of throwing them under the bus or abandoning them. And every time, it takes time, but every time, those doubters and doomers are proven wrong by facts on the ground, right? And the people constantly have to remind people of this fact are the very leaders in these allied movements, right? In the Axis. People like Nazar Banat, people like Yahya Sinwar, people like Nasrallah, right? They're constantly reminding people, the doubters, that without the constant support, training, financing, and solidarity from Iran, there would be no resistance in that particular region. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind when Iran goes into talks while Israel and the Lebanese comprador regime are negotiating, right, and continuing to bomb southern Lebanon and the resistance. That is not abandonment. That is another battlefield, and the negotiating table is its own battlefield, and they're not separate. And the leadership will not let them be separated. They will not concede that on the negotiating table.
That's unless you're a Lebanese authority negotiator at the Zionist table, because then your country's on the menu. But I love the way we are always coming back to that point of, I think it's humility at the end of the day. It's like some people have made a very expensive, very difficult choice of standing up and resisting. And those of us who align with their goals, who have an analysis that tells us that imperialism needs to be brought down, that it is this literally death producing force that threatens to turn every live thing on earth into dead stuff, have a duty to listen, have a duty to learn from those people, have a duty to legitimize the fight of those people. And this is in the West, a lot of that war is narrative, psychological warfare, and our minds are the battlefields. And once we understand, we realize that our duty is just to legitimize their struggle and legitimize their right of self-determination, which also means their right to struggle in their own way. There was some debate in the chat, and I've seen it before, about Leif Marouf's position, which is to go after all Jews and say, hey guys, how come there hasn't been a single John Brown amongst you? How come there hasn't been a single person that's put their life on the line to protect Palestinians? Not a single Oscar Schindler, not a single, there were 10,000 Germans who joined the armed resistance. My own grandfather was a Germanophile and a German professor in France from a German region of France. He joined the resistance. And when he joined the resistance, he never went around saying, oh, you shouldn't call the Germans, bad names, because we're not against the Germans, we're just against the Nazis. It made no sense at the time. And there is still this discourse that, that some of us, if you're a Palestinian fighting, you have absolutely no ground to stand on, and go to Leif Marouf, who is every day near the battlefront in Lebanon. You shouldn't be mean to Jews, because there are some good Jews, but I have some friends who are Jews and they don't like what Milikovsky is doing. That is not our place. Like, and it is the case that, if some Jewish comrades are really incensed by what Leif is doing, then Leif is doing his job. And hopefully you get incensed enough to go and literally physically fight those demons in their synagogues, in their so-called Jewish institutions that are 95 to 97% Zionist everywhere in the world today. If you want to defend this particular identity, well, all power to you, brothers and sisters, but don't bring your fight into the resistance. That is not the resistance struggle. Like you have the Zionists every day calling themselves the Jews. They're sending leaflets to the Palestinians, to the Lebanese. The Jews are going to do this to that. The Jews are going to do this to you. The Jews are going to destroy their villages. And the minute the people who are on the receiving end of this turn around and say, we don't want the Jews to oppress us anymore, they go, oh, that's anti-Semitic. You should always say anti-Zionist. What are we talking about? What the hell are we talking about? We have absolutely no leg to stand on. And I'll tell you, my grandfather didn't spend a second of the fight against the Nazis going against people who said, to each, they had this slogan, each French person needs to shoot their kraut. And he then go, oh, Kraut doesn't respect, Goethe and Schelling and Schopenhauer and Heinrich Heine and all these great, German thinkers. He went, that's a discussion to be had the day the Nazis are actually brought down. So, get this. And I think Leif is totally right when he goes against all those people who try to go, including Jewish people. The problem is Zionism. The problem is the capture of the Jewish identity by Zionism. And if you don't like it, go and fight for that identity, but don't ask anyone else to fight for it. Everybody is justified to hate Jews today. I personally don't, but that's my, between me and the guy in the mirror. But I'm never going to tell, especially someone on the front line, the Palestinian person, don't do that. There's a great text on Substack by Olive Leith-Penn, who's also on Twitter about, this particular indignity of forcing on Palestinians this anti-Zionism and forcing Palestinians to separate between the Jews and the Zionists, all the while, deciding who can speak for the Palestinians. And it's Norman Finkelstein here, and it's Max Blumenthal there, and it's Aaron Mate there, and it's Gabor Mate. Who the hell gave Jews the right to speak for Palestinians or to tell Palestinians who are being oppressed in the name of Jewishness how they should speak to their oppressors? I think we should be very clear about this. And if it means walking through the ring of fire of being called an anti-Semite, walk through this ring. It kind of burns the first time you walk through it, and on the other side you find freedom. And if you're not a bigot, you won't become a bigot just because of that. And if you're a bigot, you are anyway, so that won't change very much on that front.
Yeah, Mikey helpfully shared this post by Amanda Galentner, who has suggested much the same. I will say that as a scholar and historian of religious prejudice and bigotry, particularly anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and its roots in Latin Christendom, in the era, of course, of the Crusades and all of that, that I do think that we will see a certain kind of right-wing exploitation of, this vanishing difference between, and partly because of the, incredibly genocidal, horrific, contemptible actions of the state of Israel, and the fact that very few other than high-profile, kind of media folks who have earned an incredible following as a result of being kind of, in some ways, the critics of Zionism as Jews, that apart from that, between those two things, that there's very little space. It can be analytically very little, there's very little space for really being able to talk successfully, it seems to be, about the longer history and sources of anti-Semitism, which is the long-running form of religious bigotry and racism in the Latin West, in Europe, etc., and that we will see like right-wingers exploiting this, not because they stand for justice for Palestine or, liberation of humans, but because they have this antipathy that has an older, longer sort of source. And to my mind, this is most unfortunate, but it isn't exactly as as one would say. I mean, it's my problem in the sense that I study this phenomenon, and so I want to stand for universal sort of justice. But as a community, I'm much more seized by the ever-present and useful, dangerous use of Islamophobia for things like this war on Iran that obviously relies wholly on Islamophobia to be able to manufacture a sense that the Islamic Republic of Iran and its people, unless they overthrow their government and prove to be nice secular Western liberals, are, imprisoned by their, religious faith and identity, in a kind of, primitive, anti-modern, irrational, medieval religious idea. And this justifies the need for Western imperialist intervention, almost eliminationist scale violence, right? So obviously that to me seems like the bigger issue, the problem, rather than trying to find the narrow space where, yes, there will be right-wing reactionaries who will exploit this. I mean, we stand against them, but, the fact is we've got a bigger task at hand here, it seems to me.
May I invite you to share Nada's article, which I sent you the link. It's also on Substack. Because Amanda Gelander is a Jew, and there's no problem. When I actually contacted her, I wanted to invite her on Resistance is Fertile. She said, "Oh, you should invite Nada, who's putting the Palestinian side of the same point. So if you could show it, it would be really nice, because
this one too, yeah,
it would be a bit ironic if the point was made and had to be. It was made by a Jewish person, of course, but Nada made it." From the Palestinian side, and I think we need to amplify.
I haven't read this, so I recommend that I read it, but I'm going to Benji's recommending to all of you to check it out.
Yeah, she's a beautiful, she's an amazing writer. She is extremely fierce on Twitter, and she, calls Jewish supremacy for what it is, and she says, "Jews F off out of my country," and nobody can take issue with her about that. But when she writes that piece, which is all about, how the world insists that everything that can be known about Palestine needs to be known through Jewish voices. Even like Finkelstein, I don't know if you remember, after the floodgates opened, Finkelstein came on every single podcast to say, even I had given up on Gaza. And if I had given up on Gaza to interest myself in anti-wokeism of all things, if I had given up on Gaza, it meant, there was nothing to be done with Gaza. Like the fucking white supremacy of that particular argument. And so many people learned about Gaza from Finkelstein, and people learn about Zionism from Gabor Mate, and people learn about, the evil deeds of Mileikowsky through Max Blumenthal. What is wrong? And what Nada is saying is, yeah, we're just, the Jews are sitting in our house, but not just in Palestine, in our media houses, in our voice house. They are sitting in the seat of those people who are going to inform the world about the injustices visited on Palestine. And she said, and we just sit outside this house. And so she has every reason to be enraged. She has every reason to hate them. And yet, when you read this article, it's love that comes out of it. And I don't know how she does it. And I don't believe I would be able to do it in her position, but you can see what she writes is rooted in love. And there's one person I want to particularly point to. There's this guy on Twitter, used to be an absolute rabid genocidal. I think it's called Shael Ben something or other. He said he was a member of Unity.
He is a total scammer.
8,200. and he's repurposed himself as an anti-Zionist because one day he went to the Gaza fence and did I don't know what, a few Instagram videos. And this guy is hosting small Gaza fundraisers, and you can understand it from the perspective of folks in Gaza, who will accept help from anyone. And he spends his days on Twitter literally abusing, and by the way, he was expelled from the US for alleged improper sexual conduct with minors, and he literally abuses our steadfast Palestinian al-Thawabet Twitter posters on every day, and so many of us, people who are pro-Palestine are actually following this guy and retweeting him. And it's beyond me. And it says something about our diseased minds that, and you know what? I had this virus that I literally sometimes waited for a Jew to say something that I knew to be true about Palestine, so I could retweet it and say, you see, if a Jew says it, it must be true. And then suddenly I started realizing what the hell I was doing, right? It can only be true if a Jew says it. What are you talking about? It's like, Francesca Albanese did so much to publicize the Palestinian cause. No, she's just sucking the air out of the room. Why don't you go and ask Palestinians? They've known for over 120 years what it's like to be invaded and turned into non-people in your own land. So those are very deep maladies that we Westerners carry. And again, I'm not saying I'm better. I used to carry them, and I've been a one-stater since December 1981. So it tells you how deep the malady goes in the minds of every one of us. But stop doing this. Stop going. Max Blumenthal is a great ally. If really those people are great allies, they will do something that really puts maybe not their life, but their livelihood in danger in the service of Palestine. They have not done any of that, and therefore I believe they don't have a right to speak about Palestine. It's like at the time of the Nazis, because white people only understand stuff when we talk about the Nazis. They can't, because the Nazis, they're white people, the white on white crime, this, and Nada speaks about it in her article. White on white crime, this touches the heart of whitey, right? So it's exactly as if in the times of the Nazi Holocaust, you would have just amplified the voices of Germans living in Germany and just saying, this is bad, what's happening, but not doing anything more than that. That would have been crazy. At the same time, you had 10,000 underground fighters, armed fighters against the Nazis inside of Germany. So, come off it. If you want to just be performative as a Jew, you don't have a right to speak about Palestine unless and until you go against what they've made out of your identity, or you just drop it. My family is of Catholic stock. I don't give a fig what happens to the Catholic identity. It doesn't matter.
You mean you're not outraged, Benji, by what Donald Trump said about the Pope? I mean, it seems.
No, I'll say a few things on this. I put you the video. It's really funny. So I think those guys are just free-falling. J.D. Vance did TPUSA thing today. Not a quarter of the seats were full. And even then, people were trolling him, heckling him about killing children. It's seeping in. They have nobody left. And Trump now puts this, and did you see? He put this crazy AI image that some crazy MAGA sent to him. And Trump as Jesus, and someone in the White House managed to add a demon to the image that wasn't the original image. And our Iranian brothers and sisters were actually amazing. And I just learned today there was an interview of the Explosive Media guys. They're actually a collective of graphic artists, psychologists, people who are down with the culture, kind of cultural analysts, political scientists. These guys, they are the A team. I mean, I knew it when I saw it. I knew this was top tier psychological warfare. And anyway, can you? And they probably all these Iranian embassies, right? Can you play the one from the Iranian embassy? So the Iranian embassy took the Trump as Jesus picture and made an AI animation out of it. I'm saying, I'm not joking. They have underground meme cities. Like they are so well organized. They have studied the West so much and realized that, the Western philosophical idealism are totally retreated into narrative, believing that you can create reality with the narratives. And they went, oh, okay, we're going to study how you do it. And we're going to fight you on this battlefront. And it's to the point that the people who spend money to go to a TP USA, Turning Point USA meeting, no, they've seen the videos. Okay, so yeah, play this one if you can, brother. So this is yeah, do it again.
Your reckoning has come. What is this?
What is this? Stop.
Your reckoning has come.
What is this?
One more time. Yeah, Eric.
It has come on their chosen battlefield, brothers and sisters. You have to understand, they chose the battlefield, and on this battlefield they died. They chose the hill to die on, and the Iranians were waiting for them under the hill. And they came out of the hill and threw them back to hell. I remember when it started the first day, I changed my Twitter handle and I said, shit posters of the world laughed those demons back to hell. And the Iranian consulate in Hyderabad, India, has just lived my meme. Here to serve.
We have a late arrival.
Indi,
sorry,
Indi,
I slept
how are
in.
you?
Good. It's New Year. It was New Year here yesterday, so I mean that's not an excuse really, but I slept in.
Well,
Hey.
we're kind of close to. I was just about to say we are close to the roundup.
No, wrap it up. I was just listening.
But
just
there are a
watching
lot of
Jesus explode Donald Trump's head.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
think
I
that's the
figure,
end.
we always make sure that everybody gets a go around for anything that they didn't get a chance to say that they might want to raise. But I think we should, afford you an opportunity to introduce some of the things that you might want to say, if you have anything.
So I've just been watching like the spread that's just like opening between. There's all this weird spreads that are opening up that are gonna snap at some point between like oil futures and then oil present prices. And in the U.S., like you can see, there's a big spread opening up. So Steven Semler covers it between military spending and public investment. There's just all these sort of like deltas opening up. You can call it a gulf even, and like something's going to snap. It's just weird sitting in Asia where people are kind of like rationing fuel and jet fuel, and then people in America like pretending like this is not going to affect them, like we don't live in a globalized economy. But you can just see these, and then I don't know. I've just been watching the U.S. markets, just like what are they? It's like a casino where nobody wants to go home. It's like someone's put the lights on, like they've cleared the buffet, but these guys are like still playing.
It's insane.
Yeah. I'm always astonished by that there isn't more. I think it's a topic of discussion, but it's not a topic of deep engagement, in at the university, in like social circles. To me, it's very stunning. I mean, this is the 12th Iran versus the Epstein Empire. We have said very clearly we think these are potentially world transforming events taking place and processes being disrupted. And this is, to my mind, all I can really think and talk about, successfully. Well, I don't want to say successfully, but I mean obsessively, I suppose I should say, because it just seems so important. And the fact is that people are going through, and you do have to go through life and take your kids to school and, all those kinds of basic, normal daily things. But you might do so with a sense of urgency. You might raise this issue. You might, spend time reading things. And I don't get the sense that it's percolated yet into U.S., any Western countries.
I don't get that, because the
Yeah.
first day the war started in Sri Lanka, they had fuel queues. So we were watching a cricket match in Kandy, and we came back, and all the petrol stations had queues, which were actually blocking sort of the main road. And we actually didn't have shortages, but we kind of people like knew what was coming, and what people were thinking about was, how do I get my kids to school, or how do I, all the bread and butter issues. That's what people were. But I guess that's because we've had a fuel crisis and other crises before. Because right now, demand destruction has to happen. I think there's like 13 million barrels at least that are off. So there is demand destruction happening here or in the Philippines, but our demand was never high anyway. So, I mean, the demand destruction still has to come out of somewhere. I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it to come to America. But it's come. I mean, but Mikey, I think you were saying in Hawaii there is like the prices are higher than in the mainland.
Oh yeah, well, except for like California, which is really high. Yeah, we're hovering around $6 already per gallon, and it's definitely going to get worse. And because Hawaii is illegally occupied by the U.S. military, first to be used as a coaling station, and then having the sovereign progressive Hawaiian Kingdom cooed by a handful of capitalists in the U.S. in 1893, and then secured in 1898, we are completely dependent on imports. So Hawaii used to be, thanks to the Ahupua'a system, a completely self-sufficient, 100% food sovereign nation. And now we in terms of like our reliance on imports, we are very much like Qatar and the UAE. If the ports in Honolulu Harbor close for more than 2 weeks, or if ships just stop coming, right, we starve. We start to starve. 90% of our population will starve. And I think that is a really great argument for Hawaiian sovereignty movement, which is a silver lining. But yeah, I think we're definitely gonna start to see the cracks finally appear, and I think even when oil futures continue not to reflect reality, or even the future reality on the ground, I think we'll still, we'll be seeing dramatic shifts in standard of living for possibly years, and it's only going to get worse. These economic time bombs are going to have kind of a cascade effect, right? It's like blowing up a bomb in a warehouse like block that all have fireworks in it, right? When one critical component in the supply chain is short or completely not available anymore, that has cascading effects downstream along the entire supply chain. So things like helium, aluminum.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The speaker Galibaf, he released like an equation. Like he tweeted an equation, which I didn't understand, but someone broke it down, and it's showing like first order effects and then second order effects and cascading. And of course, in Hawaii, you guys are used to having jet fuel in your water. You need like a lot of it.
Oh Lord, yeah.
There is, we had Sister Khadija Haynes on RIF podcast last week, and watch this if you can. And she was saying how she thinks revolution will come to the US when people's food starts becoming scarce. And I just saw this tweet I'm going to read today from a Jennifer Harper Bowen. She went, "My husband and I were talking last night about how a 12-pack of drinks is $9 now, and how in 2020, 6 years ago, I used to buy them for $10. I decided to go back into my Walmart app, don't do this, and see what I was paying for a random grocery order. In January 2020, I paid $70.20 for 30 items. I added all of them to the cart again and repurchased them today. Today, those 30 items were $165.42. That's a 95.22 price increase in 4 years' time. That's a 135.6% inflation percentage. We can't go on living like this. I can't be the only one who feels that way. Something is going to give. And I learned today one thing that I didn't know. 1 barrel of oil amounts to 4 1.6 years of an average person's manual work. 1 barrel of oil. Diesel is central to everything, and as Mikey said earlier, diesel cannot be made in the US so easily. So something is going to give. We are going to see big changes in our lives, and there, at last, in the belly of the beast, we are going to face the choice between revolution or starvation, basically. And it's high time, it's Lenin's revolutionary defeatism. It's high time we who have been living high on the hog for so many years, because maybe that $70.20 grocery basket was actually underpriced if you factor in how many brown people, were genocided for the convenience. It's high time the defeat came to us, so we get a chance to stand up and fight for our future. And it will come with sacrifices, because that's what fighting for dignity in the face of a demonic system implies. And that's what it costs. This is the cost of being a free person.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I mean, we haven't. I had wanted to. This is so far back now that it's just really like archived almost. But when Mikey had been talking about the people who were in the leadership on the National Security Council and who were part of the negotiations, it just reminded me that there had been that period where the video about Ghalibaf talking about the death of his brother had circulated quite a lot on social media, and there was such an incredible contrast, between and in general. In fact, actually, I would love to, with somebody who would be, capable, perhaps, or maybe somebody on this panel is, I wouldn't count myself among them, but somebody who would be capable of talking a little bit more about kind of masculinity and forms of masculinity, because I just thought, we've seen so many videos of, Iranian, high exalted Iranian leaders, military commanders, diplomats, foreign minister, shedding tears about things, expressing their emotions in an incredibly comfortable, natural sort of way. And I thought, that is a different model of masculinity. I'm not saying there isn't patriarchy. I mean, of course, there is patriarchy in, societies in West Asia, just as there is, even though it may express itself and articulate in slightly different ways and mechanisms, just as there is in the West and other societies, etc. But I do find this quite healthy and interesting as a contrast between a faux preening, fascistic, belligerent, angry wife beater. As far as I understand, those allegations, are pretty well established. Alcohol abusing wife beater in the Secretary of War, and this, where it's about the muscles and the wearing certain kind of clothes to accentuate them and being aggressive in public, rather compared to this sort of dignity of these are military figures, a lot of them, but the dignity and comfort with expressing their emotion. I just thought that was really interesting also. And, I don't want to take too much time and play the whole video, because probably people have seen it. But what I thought was most interesting or most important in what he said were the two moments. One was saying goodbye to his brother, not being able to say goodbye to his brother because he's a commander of a unit. And it would not have been appropriate for him to express personal affection for his brother when he couldn't and would have wanted to be able to hug and say goodbye to all of them. So all of the people under his command. And so he had to do it just in a kind of broader general way, because that is an example that he set of respecting his office and the importance of his role, and it involved sacrifice. Okay, sacrifice of what would have been emotionally satisfying for him personally in that moment. And then afterwards, when his brother was martyred, was killed, hearing about that his body had been recovered and going to the location where he thought, at least if I wasn't able to say goodbye to him when he was alive, I'd like to give him a hug to his body and say goodbye that way. And then again, sacrificing. Why? Because there were 30 others, families who didn't have the remains of their children, their brothers, their sisters. And he desperately wanted to show his emotion for his brother. But again, having regard for the feelings of others, for what the office requires of him, and sacrificing in that moment. So on the one hand, we're seeing a video of him weeping comfortably about how painful, about how difficult it was to do his duty in those moments, and remembering the loss, not only of the loss of his brother, but that hundreds of thousands have lost. The reason why it's an interesting story is because it's about the loss of being able to express this love and affection and saying goodbye to his brother, is that he's weeping about it. He's totally comfortable with that, but he also has the strength to control that and to refrain from that, because he has a job to do. He is a commander in the army, and he has to adhere to certain, characteristics to give an example of not showing favoritism, not showing self-indulgence, but doing his duty. I thought that was incredible. I didn't see anybody discussing it from that perspective, but I think that's why it was such a kind of widely disseminated video, is because it spoke to that sacrifice. And that, to my mind, is genuine. An ideal of masculinity is that you will be willing to have the strength to control your emotions when it's required, to sacrifice to do your job on behalf of others. And this is the whole thing, is it's not this narcissistic selfishness. The whole culture that they're trying to show us is sacrificing, like the people of Iran have done for 47 years, to fight for exactly what Mikey quoted from their constitution, is for the oppressed of the world, and to intervene on their behalf, not only not to commit the oppression, but to try and intervene on their behalf to protect them. And if that means that you have to sacrifice, that's a commitment that they are willing to do. They are only suffering this because they have stood in solidarity with the people of Palestine. And that just came home to me so much in that video.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want it to go past without us having discussed it at least a little bit.
Yeah, I would actually love to kind of build off of that. I tried to share. Oh yeah, how do I share this screen here? Oh, there we go. Yeah. I just want to show you. And the person who's weeping at a funeral is Qasem Soleimani. And I think this is such an incredible video, and I think it touches on what you were talking about, just like the kind of narrative that's developed in the former patriarchy inscribed into the Epstein regime narrative, right? Also includes the total dehumanization of Iranian men. And I think we saw that in the way that Western media would use that same image, like of, and I think they would also color correct it so that it would be more contrasty, so the shadows would be darker, right? But that image of Qasem Soleimani just glowering, right? And it was the only image that was in the kind of Western colonial imaginary when he was assassinated by Donald Trump, right? Because it's important that we don't see the full humanity of the people who are killed in these decapitation strikes, right? That that they can say that the U.S. is doing a liberating project on behalf of, in particular, the woman who needs saving in Iran, right? That this is a civilizing mission to liberate Iran from these inhuman monsters who, take the form of Qasem Soleimani. And I think it is in that context also important to know like what Qasem Soleimani did, the legacy that he leaves behind. The axis of resistance exists in the formation and in the power and organization that it currently has because of Qasem Soleimani. And under the directives of the supreme leaders. And so I think, what does this all mean in the broader scope? Yes, there are still definitely, of course, internal contradictions, particularly intense internal contradictions in Iran on the woman question, right? There's patriarchy in Iran. There's patriarchy everywhere in the same way that capitalism rules everything around us. But I do think that we can locate the principal contradiction of imperialism in the way that the Epstein regime weaponizes patriarchal representation of the other, right? And how it's used to dehumanize Iranian men. And I think the videos that are coming out now are a great kind of intervention in that narrative. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I would love to go to what's happening in southern Lebanon, or on the topic of the axis of resistance and combating predominant narratives. I think I've heard in the past 3 days at least like 10 times that Israel has taken Ben Shabil, right? Like they keep saying they've taken it, they've completely encircled it, the resistance is dead. And then almost immediately after you hear or see those posts, you'll hear major security incident in southern Lebanon in Ben Shabil, right? Like I think there's been 3 commanders who have been critically injured or had an unfortunate laundry incident in their pants. Like they are still being vastly outnumbered, possibly in the low hundreds against, or less, right? Against thousands of Israeli troops with full air support, constant, relentless bombardment, and ground conflict with the aid of 3 Israeli brigades, and they are still holding strong. And what I this is going back to like resisting doomerism again, right? And resisting knee-jerk reactions to every development. To not to take Basa or words to heart, right? Don't share the propaganda of the enemy. Don't share the attitudes. Don't internalize the attitudes that the enemy is trying to impart within you. And don't disseminate that despair. Especially when the fighting is never done, right? So I would really encourage people, there's going to be genocidal triumphalist propaganda coming out in southern Lebanon for the coming weeks and months, probably, right? In the same way that we saw Israelis in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, Al-Aqsa flood, trying to literally plant flags in the sands of the rubble that they just, of Gaza City, right? To try to establish some type of dominance in the midst of world historic defeat. And we're going to see more of that. We saw some of that today, right? Where an IOF soldier stood in front of a memorial wall in Ben Shabil, right? In the drone photography of the bombing of the stadium where Nasrallah made his famous speech about the Israeli entity being as weak as a spider's web. They have never gotten over that. So of course, they are going to try to create as many propaganda victory images as possible in between the periods in which they're getting rocked by the resistance, right? They're going to take photo ops wherever they can to try to cement the idea that they have established a foothold south of the Litani, right? And what we're probably going to see, like we see throughout a lot of revolutionary struggles, is that they will possibly claim a very loose toehold on that particular municipality. And they will claim that they have secured it. And they will claim that settlers are already coming to build stuff there, right? This is a possibility. It's, in my opinion, highly likely. But I really highly doubt that they will be able to hold it because of the nature of guerrilla warfare, right? And I want to constantly remind people, so many people on the left, so many people who were fair weather supporters of the Axis of Resistance, the moment that Nasrallah was martyred, the moment that Yahya Sinwar was martyred, people said the Axis of Resistance is effectively dead and nullified, right? And what are we seeing now, right? In the past couple months, none of those people could have possibly imagined that Nasrallah wasn't just talking big about, Hezbollah's capabilities, particularly underground. This is the nature of guerrilla warfare. They're going to wait. They're not going to try to hold a position no matter what, despite any type of strategic purpose. They will if they are completely encircled and there's no choice, and they will go out as heroic martyrs. But chances are they are going to let Israel extract strategic retreats from them so that they can reconvene, reposition, and let them fall into yet another trap, which Hezbollah has been consistently doing ever since Israel escalated again. So I want to kind of extend that sense of revolutionary optimism, that imperative of maintaining humility in the midst of this struggle, extend that into Lebanon, and not to constantly prognosticate in the most pessimistic and cynical and ill-informed and overconfident fashion about who's betraying who in the resistance, who is dying and being permanently subdued in the resistance, and just trust in the resistance, support the resistance, and give them all the solidarity that they need to win in whatever ways that you are capable, especially where you live. Buy a bag of rice, fill up your gas tank.
This issue of masculinity, it's come up, and I think there is a healthy masculinity. There is the traditional stereotype, and there is something to it that men are builders and fighters and women are nurturers. So now this may be gendered roles or whatever, but they speak to an experience of very many people the world over throughout eons of time, right? Yeah, you've had some Amazon fighters at one point in history, but generally speaking, this is how the world is organized for clear, biological reasons, but I'm not saying the roles are biological themselves. But the West has corrupted everything. Like the West notion of toxic masculinity is the war fighter who rapes his way across a battlefield in battles that serve nothing except the greater narcissism of their leaders, right? And the West's image of femininity is your Barbie girl, bimbo, sex object. And of course, those two stereotypes actually speak to nothing profound in the history, in the deepest experience of what it is to be human, need to be destroyed. They're self-destructive anyway. But yes, you talked about, the strength of those fighters in southern Lebanon. That is a masculine quality, and it can totally be praised, and you can be a fighter. And this is the beauty of it. They invented the term Stockholm Syndrome because some people took to armed struggle and took hostages in their armed struggle, and they treated the hostages so well that when they were freed, they said, oh no, these people are actually good guys. And then they invented this fiction called the Stockholm Syndrome to account for the fact that even when you fight gun in hand and you're willing to kill and be killed, you can still be a moral person. You can still stand up right and be a dignified human being. And that's more of a masculine quality, not exclusively. But I think it's a positive version of masculinity. There is also the man as the builder. I'm not saying only men build, and we know that 60% of the engineers who designed these amazing missiles are actually women in Iran. But there's this little film. Can you play it? It says, please play this in there. It's a very short Lego video from our friends at Explosive Media. And this is what the men of Iran are using the ceasefire to do. Can you play it? Yeah, great. It's coming in a minute. And they are using the ceasefire to rebuild the train lines. And that is something honorable. And, you know, there are a few men think a lot about trains and Legos and this kind of stuff, train spotters.
Yeah.
And
America should get their help to like rebuild Baltimore.
Yeah. But this idea that, you know, masculinity is always toxic is a very Western idea. And it is itself a toxic idea. To be a man doesn't mean to be an abuser. It means, yes, to be strong, to stand up, to fight when needed, but you can also, you know, feel everything you feel. You can cry on someone else's shoulder. You can go and ask for the strength of nurturance, which is also a very great source of strength. When you think dialectically about these things, you know, it's not like physical strength is more strong than the nurturing strength. If you don't have those two, you can't walk on those two legs, then of course you're not going to walk very far. So I think we need to move away from this idea that, you know, every single gendered role is necessarily reactionary. It can be extremely dignified. And I admire the fighters in West Asia, and I admire the women in West Asia who nurture the fighters, and I admire the women in West Asia who actually fight with the men, and I admire the men in West Asia who nurture the women who fight and who nurture the men who fight and who nurture the children, and in Gaza who nurture the stray cats and all of that. This is all part of what it means to be human, and, you know, that we could admire some masculine qualities there. I have zero problem with that. And
you have to consider also that like the empire wants to exacerbate gender roles. It wants to like frack or divide and conquer. So if you're in a war situation, then men go in front in war. Like you have to go in front in war. If you're fighting, like men are physically stronger. So you put these cultures, these nations under stress where men have to take a certain role. And then you say, oh, look, there's men in that role. Well, why are they there? I always think, like, what if they had just left the world alone after World War II? Things would have evolved very differently. All of the liberation movements were sort of like, I mean, they incorporated women because you need to develop your productive capacity. You need to. And that happened everywhere. But then if you attack someone, then a man would naturally, and I think should naturally, step in front of their family, step in front of their mother, of their wife. And then you say, oh, look at them, they're patriarchal. They try to create those conditions for division and conquest. And then I think about this line from the Quran that the resistance always quotes, which says, among the believers there are men. And I think almost the distinction is not even the masculinity, but these, on the empire side, they don't believe in anything. There's nothing at the center of it besides being like a consumer. Like Pete Hegseth is like just about his socks and his pocket square and exercising and taking photos. There's no belief there. There's nothing to believe in. Even on the female side, Donald Trump has always had like a fair amount of like women around him in different ways, but even in management roles, like, but then they get these sort of like genocide Barbies to stand up, and the idea of femininity is being more male than the men. Even the movies, the action movies, where they're like, oh, this is like we're putting women in action roles. It's just women playing a man. So the masculinity seeps into their femininity as well. Because I mean, with Hegseth, you get like the men are now sexualized in a way that like women used to be, but then the women are violent in a way that men used to be. It's just a consumer. It's like a capitalist mash. It's just like an individual with like an erection and a wallet, and that's all humans can aspire to be. There's no belief behind it.
Well,
Looks like there's a new Lego video.
yeah, I think I think we're ready for Lego. Yeah.
And
I do have one closing thought to kick it off, but
Yeah, go
whoever
ahead.
wants can go first. Go first.
well, I just want to speak to the Lego video. It's about the rootedness in the land. It's very interesting that it comes out in the time of so-called ceasefire, when it's time for rebuilding, it's time for reconnecting to the land after the first round of the fight, as we called it last time, and before the inevitable second round, because this empire is literally the plaything of history now, and it will go and knock itself out on that Strait of Hormuz. It will do that. It cannot stop itself, and I'm here for it. But if you want a good life where you are in the belly of the beast, it won't. Iranians won't do that for you. Palestinians won't do that for you. It's for us to pick up the fight, the cudgels or whatever, and fight our own fight. It's about time, don't you think?
Yeah. I think I didn't watch the full video, but I think it does have something to do with kind of like what's to come, and the fact that Iran has a lot of inbuilt resiliency, like not just the leadership, not just the IRGC, but the Iranian people have collectively been preparing for this eventuality of a total war against their country and against their sovereignty for decades, right? I would say going back to probably 2003 when their neighbor Iraq got bombed, you know, and all of their sovereignty over their resources were stripped away. But I think it goes back to, you know, the sanctions regime that began in the immediate wake of the Islamic Revolution, right? So they have been forced by US illegal unilateral genocidal sanctions and multilateral UN sanctions. Iran has been forced to be independent and to have control over as much of the entire supply chain for every industry, every economic sector as possible because of it. Just like the DPRK, just like Cuba, just like Venezuela, right? This is why there are 3 million communards in Venezuela. There's why, you know, the medical field in Cuba is you know, remarkable and a world standard. It's why the DPRK has universal housing and universal healthcare, right? And it's why Iran, you know, we were on the subject of food sovereignty. I want to bring it back to that because I think this is intimately related to another kind of false narrative that's being trotted out and that's being widely kind of just accepted on its face by a lot of the left is that Iran is the one who's going to suffer because of this blockade. It's like, well, they started the blockade first, right? They wouldn't have done it if they didn't see, one, that such an eventuality would be possible. These are the inventors of chess, right? They think moves ahead, right? They accepted this possibility, and they've created structures of resiliency around it, and so that, you know, there's an argument being made right now that you know, cutting off imports and exports with this military blockade from Trump is going to starve out Iran's population. Well, when we're talking about food sovereignty and how Qatar and the UAE rely on imports for 90% of their food, a lot of that food comes from Iran. Iran exports a lot of the food that they make. There was a greenhouse revolution, not the green revolution, a kind of greenhouse revolution in Iran, where there's, you know, there's now like 36,000 small greenhouse operations going on in Iran, and there's all types of sectors of industrial and you know, kind of like indigenous agriculture that have been scaled up dramatically, so that Iran is now almost 90% food self-sustaining, right? And you know, they still rely on a lot of imports for grain and, you know, rice and that kind of stuff, but it's a lot of it doesn't go through the Strait of Hormuz. It goes through the Caspian or to their neighbors, you know, through actual land borders. So they will be fine. We will not be. Our fast food, just-in-time production economy are completely unsustainable. capitalist industrial agricultural system, it's not going to do well under the conditions that are about to be imposed upon it. And so if we want to talk about who will last through a war of attrition, it's the people whose entire strategy has always been to pull the US into a war of attrition.
Yeah, I mean, even one final little footnote on that is that Iran's reasonably good relations with Pakistan mean that they have actually also changed the source of their rice imports fairly recently, from India to Pakistan, and also, of course, they can export. They have overland, ways of exporting oil to Pakistan, and they have borders with 15 countries, plus, as you were saying, the Caspian Sea. I mean, this is not an easy country to isolate. Take a look at the map, folks. Like cutting off the Strait of Hormuz is worse for you than it is for them in some ways. So, any rate, I think this has been just a really, wonderful way to bring together the kind of themes of anti-doomerism and also analysis of what's been happening and going on, and giving some further hope, optimism, and confidence to us about our role continuing to support the resistance, doing what we can in the information war, and creating hopefully a space here where we can talk about some of these issues that, yes, we might have questions, thoughts, concerns on the left, but this is the space for us to have the solidarity and community to pull together and get our hearts and minds straight. And even today, we also learned how to be better men, better people. Hopefully, you never know. So that's always a good goal for 4 guys on the panel. So we can use that.
One more little point I want to make before we go to closing. Yeah, this series, the show is called Resistance is Fertile, right? I love that. I love the spin on the Borg phrasing. But yeah, I think we also have to remember that in addition to resistance being fertile, there are periods in which resistance is fallow, right? Where the ground the soil has to be let alone before you can plant for a new harvest. And so I think we need to keep that in mind whenever there isn't, a constant exchange and counter exchange between belligerents. That doesn't mean that the revolution stops in those moments, right? That peace talks are not a divergence from the revolutionary project. Is it a critical, essential part of the process of revolution?
And like one thing I'd add is, if you guys are talking about losing heart or whatever, I think, as Adnan was saying, just look at a map, right? Like you can talk about, I think people tend to live in a sort of movie version of war where aircraft carriers and planes are these magic devices, but land is an aircraft carrier. And like missiles themselves, like if the bombs themselves are planes, that's a different situation. And if you're talking about like allies, like in the UAE, whatever, that depend on everything through one strait, whereas Iran is land, and Iran has the Caspian Sea, it has land borders with a lot of people, and it has just experience of 47 years of sanctions toughening it up. If you zoom out, you can see those things. If you watch the news items, you think, oh, this is happening today, that changed everything. Or this, to me, this is like waves on the ocean of the flood. And the flood is deep and it's rising, and the waves are just sort of like the weather. So if you ever do feel disheartened, I'd say, number one, read Basil al-Araj, and just you can read those 8 points over and over, and that will answer like at least 8 of your questions. And also just zoom out. If you zoom out historically, just as Mikey was talking about, there's periods of going fallow. I read stuff from Nasrallah from the 80s and 90s when things were way more difficult. Or you can read Ho Chi Minh talking about when there were, and he says explicitly, oh, we started like fighting with bamboo. Things were way more difficult. Now we're in like, I actually kind of, if you read that, I kind of don't get how people lose heart now. This is the one part where it's obvious that the empire is on the back foot. But the people who've been paying for it have believed this back when it seemed impossible. And then I think you need like faith at some level, like find faith somewhere, because you have to have some belief in something more than like your Twitter feed. And I think that's maybe what separates people.
Amen. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you on the panel. Mikey was such a great guest to have back on. You brought so much, fresh insight and, a real boost in morale for the cadres of Iran versus the Epstein Empire. We can't thank you enough for making time to join us. My fellow hosts, and collaborators, Benji, co-host of Resistance is Fertile podcast, and Indi, latecomer, but, dropping
I'm
bars.
the token white on here.
Just don't be white, Benji. You can be something else. Be something
The only
else.
thing I like integrated are my podcasts, as to paraphrase Malcolm X. No, but this has been really wonderful to have all of you here as well. And we hope that before you leave, you might consider liking the stream just on your way out. Share it, subscribe to both channels at Indications and at Adnan Hussein Show.
And on Substack, because we won't be long from YouTube if.
Right. So also,
if we do our jobs, we'll get kicked off soon.
Resistance is Fertile podcast.substack.com. All of these things are in the video description. I do want to remind, I didn't get a chance to really talk about it and promote it, but just on the way out, don't forget, we are raising money for students in Gaza to take classes, small private online courses through MITx. I'm going to be offering a course myself, and it would be great for our students, the future students, to be able to have enough internet access to participate and to hire TAs. So I had put the link in the chat up by the top, and it's in the description, but I'm going to do it one more time here in the chat now, just in case people on their way out want to make a small contribution. It's slowly inching up. We're over 14,000 now, close to 14,100.
Wow.
So hopefully in 2-3 weeks, it would be wonderful to be able to say that the goal has been achieved. So do check it out. And before we go, I will queue up the Lego video, and let's check it out.
Some unfortunate anti-communism in this. Some of this.
Correct.
Wow. Wow. Get him.
Epstein Fury.
Wow, another like amazing classic.
Banger, as my son calls
That
it.
is, yeah, totally, really amazing. You know, there was a little bit of controversy with the whole so-called interview. You know, with the Persia boy was actually the person who was interviewed, and he does those more rappy kind of oriented ones with lyrics. I think the true classics are these explosive media ones, and I know explosive media was a little confused that who is this, and they didn't realize that it was actually about Persia boy, and the post that was talking about the interview didn't make clear that there's more than one video Lego creator on like confronting the enemies of Iran, but I think I definitely think we
This is
are
great.
team
This is good.
explosive media for sure. Yeah.
Trump said, I love people who are not educated and can't read and don't read. They're my voters. And now they're getting Lego videos.
Well, you got to speak to the people in a medium they understand. Yet another like really brilliant kind of historical documentary. So we hope all of you enjoyed that, and wish you all peace and solidarity with justice. We'll see you hopefully next time. Benji, close
Free
us.
Palestine, sweet victory to the free people of the world. Mikey, over to you.
To America.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.